I have been dying to get my hands on these IEMs because I've loved everything that Simgot has had to offer so far. Everything over the last year that I've reviewed from them has been on fire, but these I don't think are tuned for absolutely everybody. But before I get into how these are tuned, thank you to Simgot for making this review possible by sending me this demo unit. All thoughts and opinions are my own. So let's jump straight into the review with how these are built. These come in a beautifully made box with quite an unboxing experience. The box is like nothing I've really seen before. It's got a beautiful design all around it. When you take out the inner box, you'll see a very neat design with a quote from Blaise Pascal. Under this, you'll see the IEMs. You get an accessory box which holds the cable, two more nozzles that screw into the IEM for a slightly different tuning, extra rubber rings for the nozzles, the literature, and you also get a carry case as well. The cable provided is a silver-plated OFC one and is terminated to a 3.5 mm on one side, and the other side that connects to the IEMs have 0.78 mm 2-pin connectors. The IEMs have a chrome-like finish to them, so I can see these picking up a lot of scratches over time, and since these do have a dark tone to them, they tend to show a lot of fingerprints and smudges. But the overall build of these really do scream premium, especially when you first wear them, since they've got a metal build. The IEMs will feel cool or cold depending on your room temperature and will warm up with your body's temperature after a few minutes. They do have some venting ports which contribute towards how these stage and handle their lower frequencies as other Simgot IEMs do too. And of course, you do get very well made nozzles that you can swap between for slightly different sound. The cable provided does not have a microphone, so if you connect to your phone, the phone's microphone will take over for calls and gaming. These come with 10 mm dual magnetic, dual cavity dynamic drivers, have a frequency response of 10 Hz all the way up to 50,000 Hz, and they have a very easy to drive low resistance of just 21 ohms. And thanks to being so easy to drive, on a volume front, I didn't find myself going too high in volume, so I'm usually hovering around 25 to 30% volume on my phone using the iFi Go Link. I wouldn't recommend going beyond maybe 35 and 40% for prolonged periods of time if you do intend on preserving your hearing, because it does get quite loud over there. Now, if you do want to listen to this at softer volumes, below 20%, well, it's bound to thin out, especially with its lower frequencies, but it doesn't thin out as much as I expected it to below 20%, which is why I do like listening to it at about 25%, but it does sort of level out. Everything is more or less better balanced at about 30% volume. When it comes to their soundstage, it does perform like most other IEMs, but I've noticed that most Simgots do have a slightly wider stage. So more often than not, you do have some tones coming from slightly further out of the IEMs, say maybe an inch away from them where they're sitting in your ear. This is also thanks to some venting ports that they do have within these IEMs. So the stage is impressive. It does sit on a horizontal plane, and you do have good left and right separation with a well-centered phantom channel. When it comes to its imaging, I do like how Simgot has decided to tune these, because it is not too aggressive or sharp in its overall delivery. It is a little more rounded than I expected it to be. And the thing is, I do like more rounded detail, because some manufacturers can tend to make sort of delivery with detail a little too aggressive, a little too fine. The separation is too defined, whereas this has rounded edges. So I do find it more enjoyable in particular. So when it comes to its overall detail and nuance, it's easy to zone in on to whatever you want to enjoy, be it vocals or instruments. The separation between even vocals and instruments, or layers of multiple vocals in the same track, is fairly easy to do. So I'd say it's very enjoyable to listen to. When it comes to its high frequencies, it definitely does have an accentuation, and when it comes to this range, I can see it being a little too sharp for some people, especially if they are high frequency sensitive. This range has loads of sparkle in it, especially when you're listening to any classical music. The upper range percussive instruments really do push through sometimes a little more than I'd like, but there is good detail in this range. I would have preferred this range to be a little mellow. Thankfully, Simgot has provided two other nozzles you can swap with, and I do prefer one of them, which I'll speak about in a moment. But straight out of the box, these can be a little too forward with its highs for certain. Listening to Come What May, performed by the Danish National Symphony Orchestra, I've never heard this much shimmer from this track before with IEMs. This is a good thing for some and not so good for others who can find this a little too sharp. It's a beautiful track and well mixed as well, but it just seems a little too forward in the highs compared to the rest of the spectrum. This might be perfect for some folk who like that extra spike in this range, but if you're not that that person, this is one thing to keep in mind about these IEMs. Mid frequencies are certainly recessed compared to the highs, but thankfully it doesn't sound distant. Vocals remain forward in their presentation and depending on the recording can be slightly on the sibilant side. Newer recordings avoid this, but older ones can sound more on the sibilant side of things. There is good instrument and vocal separation with these, and they do manage to have good layering if there are multiple vocals and instruments in a track. Male and female vocals maintain a fullness in their delivery without getting thin or nasal, which I always prefer having with any audio equipment, and this is thanks to Simgot not reducing the lower mid-range too much. Listening to Haley Reinhardt perform Lover with Jeff Goldblum and the Mildred Snitzer Orchestra, her voice comes through with a soft fullness that's very welcoming to listen to here. She would have sounded thinner if Simgot decided to pull those lower mids even lower, but I'd say this is just right. This is a soft track, but the instruments here have a very soft and calming energy while you listen to it with these IEMs. I'd say they're great for easy listening music like this. When it comes to its lower frequencies, it is certainly elevated, but what I like about how Simgot has tuned this is that it has an accentuation in the sub-low frequencies without compromising on any details or even the mid-range. There's a good amount of energy in the lower range despite not having a hard recess in the lower mids, and this range doesn't carry bloat, giving you a clearer and tighter presentation in the lower frequency range. Something to keep in mind is making sure you're wearing the right ear tip size, because if you aren't, you might have some amount of leakage and this will certainly affect the bass performance. And at the same time, these do not give you a big bloated bass like you get from some TWS earphones in a similar price range. Simgot has chosen more of a tighter structure, so you get a defined bass line instead of a large wall of bass. Listening to an old favorite of mine, Cafe de Flore by Dr. Rocket, the bass is certainly more prominent than what I would have expected from a set of IEMs, and it is an enjoyable presentation with this track, but I do prefer how it handles this range with softer music like jazz, blues and classical music, because it doesn't have a heaviness in this range that I would have preferred with a bass heavy track like this. In other words, it's not exaggerated bass, which I do prefer with lighter genres of music. Simgot does give you the option of playing around with the tuning of these IEMs mechanically with nozzles. Now, you do get one set of nozzles already screwed on, which are the gold set, but you do get two other nozzles which do tweak the sound very slightly. I've tested these with the ones that came straight out of the box. They're the gold ones with a red ring around it, and the other two you get are a silver with a red ring and a silver with a black ring. There are slight differences between these nozzles thanks to the interior part of the nozzle having different materials within them. The gold nozzle has a sponge-like material within it, as well as the silver one with black rings, but the silver one appears to have a sponge with a higher density than the gold nozzle. The silver nozzle with red rings is targeting Simgot's 2023 target and doesn't have a sponge in it. It does sound like it has more energy in the sub-low region and more of a recess in the mid-range. So it's nice that Simgot has given an option to play with the tuning mechanically. So to sum up, on a build front, this does come with a beautiful finish. In fact, the cable and the carrying case that comes with it, I think is the same one that they give with the EM6L, because it just matches it up pretty well. So I think it's just a carry-on down or a carry-on up. Either way, it's very good quality. But when it comes to the IEMs in particular, it's nice that they've got those nozzles. Now those nozzles are solid screw-ons. They are made very well. They sit very flush. They've done a very good job of making these mechanical tuning nozzles to play around with the sound. But the small gripe I do have is that the overall finish of the IEM is, well, it's nice that it's chrome, but this kind of finish will show scratches in time. In fact, I've seen some people with older EW200s that have just shown lots of scratches over time. So if you're very particular, I'm sure you'll be extremely careful with it, putting it into the case more often than not. And the other thing is, because it does have a darker shade to it, it shows fingerprints like mad. So I hate opening a case and seeing fingerprints. So I always wipe them down before putting them in the case, so that before I put them on the next time, I know they look as clean as possible. When it comes to its sound, well, my only gripe with this is maybe that higher frequency, because there's something that just comes through a little too prominently, a little too aggressive. It's not as well balanced as the rest of the frequency spectrum. But The mid range I think is smooth enough. It is a bit recessed compared to the highs, but I think it's at a nice level where vocals do come through effortlessly and quite smoothly. In fact, I did enjoy Haley Reinhardt's voice with these, and I like the bass because it's not bloated, it's not big, and most IEMs are tuned like this, but this has most of its energy, I'd say, in the sub-low frequency, because there is a good amount of rumble that comes out of this. But again, I wouldn't like this myself with EDM music, nothing heavy that way, but you talk about anything acoustic, the way this handles the low frequencies, it's like it wants to play more acoustic stuff. So jazz, blues, even if you're listening to stuff like rock or heavy metal, I think the amount of kick and energy it has in the bass is good enough if you're not looking for big and bloated bass. If you want big and bloated bass, well, I don't know most IEMs that, or any IEMs that do that. Your TWS stuff is the way to go, where it's just unnatural bass. So this is tight and it's very well structured. So I do like the bass response on this. But coming back to those higher frequencies, I've got a feeling that Simgot may have been targeting the 500 ml towards more they want gamers to use this more than music listening, because I think the frequency that is peaked or spikes is more so where people's footsteps or any kind of movement through rustling of leaves or trees, if you are into FPS gaming and you hear something on either channel of your IEMs, you'll know that somebody's there if they're trying to sneak up on you. So I think it's more directed towards that. Now, coming back to the richness in that area, I did like the nozzle that has the more high density foam in it, but also, I do suspect that, in fact, I didn't do this, I should have done this, but I do suspect that if I were to put foam ear tips on this, it will mellow that higher frequency down considerably. So that is also one thing to consider if you do like how this otherwise performs, because the imaging I do like a lot, because it's not daggers at you in detail. It is kind of rounded around the edges in its detail. It's not too sharp in that respect. So I do like a softer delivery all in all, because softer deliveries are usually more musical. I mean, if you've ever heard a guitar in the flesh by a good player and a good guitar, they're not shrill. They're even the higher strings, the higher pitches off of that string are a lot mellower, they're softer, they're musical. So all in all, I do like these IEMs. My only gripe might be that higher frequency, and I'm pretty sure foam ear tips will sort this out, or even that high density nozzle if you're worried about that frequency in particular. And of course, if you are also somebody who likes to play around with EQs, you can try that out as well. So anyway, moving on to how much these would cost if you wanted to buy them. Well, at the time of recording this video, these do have a maximum retail price of about 8,999, but they do have a selling price on headphonezone.ie, and I'll leave the links down below, for just 7,590. And if you want to buy this off of Linsole, this does go for $89.99. And honestly, like when it comes to the overall value of these, well, just on its build alone, I think it's absolutely beautiful. In fact, I haven't had a set or reviewed a set of Simgots that have upset me when it comes to the build quality. These do feel quite premium, and I will always, if I had money like this and I had a choice between something like this or wireless earphones, I'd go with this, because these scream premium. And I do like the sound, but personally I do like the high density nozzle, because it does mellow that high frequency down just about to my threshold where I'm okay with it, but I'm not 100% with it. So I do want to try that for the foam high density nozzle with foam ear tips. So I'll check that out and maybe let you know in the comments how that works out. But yeah, anyway, if you do have the budget for these and you do like how it sounds, I think these are a great buy. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative, and I do hope that I've helped you make some sort of purchase decision. If you would like to help support the channel, I'm sure you know exactly how to. But of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.